The first time I heard Xavier Patel's voice, he was telling me that he was staying in an endangered species habitat, while a Type 1 wildfire was bearing down on his location. And I was in a firefighting helicopter at 200 feet trying to understand how someone with a PhD could be making such catastrophically bad decisions. My name is Adrian Ross. I'm 26 years old, and I pilot firefighting helicopters for the Los Angeles County Fire Department. I fly aerial operations during wildfires, water drops, personnel extraction, damage assessment, emergency evacuations. I'm good at what I do because precision matters at altitude, because people's lives depend on split-second decisions, and because I understand that fear is a useful tool if you know how to manage it. My mother died in the Woolsey fire in 2018 when she was evacuating. I became a firefighting pilot because I wanted to be the person who gets people out, not the person who watches people get left behind. Dr. Xavier Patel was not a firefighting pilot. He was a 31-year-old forest ecologist at UCLA specializing in endangered species habitat preservation, and he was calling me on Friday afternoon at 14:52 from a field research location in the Los Angeles National Forest because a lightning-caused wildfire had ignited at 13 o'clock approximately 5 miles from his position, and evacuation corridors were closing rapidly. The fire started at 13 o'clock, Xavier said, his voice controlled but with the specific tension of someone in actual danger, trying to sound professional. Current fire progression is approximately 150 acres per hour in this terrain. The fire is moving northeast. My position is south of the fire front, which means I'm theoretically in the evacuation zone, but I'm also in the habitat zone for the Sierra Nevada arroyo toad Anaxyrus californicus, which is a critically endangered species. I have 3 individuals here with radiotelemetry implants. If I evacuate, the toads are left in the fire zone with zero protection. Dr. Patel, I said, very carefully, because I'd been trained in how to talk to people who were about to make catastrophically bad decisions. You need to evacuate immediately. The fire is moving at 150 acres per hour. Your position is 5 miles from the ignition point, which means you have approximately 50 minutes before the fire reaches your location. I understand the fire dynamics, Xavier said. I also understand that there are only 47 known Sierra Nevada arroyo toads remaining in existence. 3 of them are in my research site. All 3 are tagged with radiotelemetry implants that I deployed last year. If they burn, we lose 6.4% of the critically endangered population. I need 90 minutes to locate and capture these individuals using the telemetry signals. Once I have them, I evacuate immediately. You have 50 minutes, I said. And that's if the fire doesn't accelerate. You're looking at a scenario where you get trapped. Then I'll work faster, Xavier said. Can you get here? Can you extract me if the fire reaches my position? I was already checking fuel consumption and flight time. I'm 12 minutes out. What's your GPS location? He gave me coordinates. I plugged them into the helicopter's navigation system and checked the fire progression map. The fire had already consumed approximately 1,100 acres in 90 minutes. The smoke column was visible from the coast. Fire behavior analysis suggested the fire was still in growth phase. I'm en route, I told Xavier. ETA 12 minutes. But Dr. Patel, I'm going to be very clear. If you cannot be ready for immediate extraction at 15:04, we're evacuating you whether you're ready or not. I will not let you burn. I'll be ready, Xavier said. Just get here. What happened over the next 36 hours was a coordinated emergency response that required balancing institutional requirements against species preservation, and understanding that those 2 things were not actually in opposition. They were different aspects of trying to protect something valuable. At 15:04 Friday afternoon, I landed the helicopter in a clearing approximately 200 meters from Xavier's research site. I could already see smoke on the horizon, not immediately visible flames, but the orange glow of active fire approximately 3 miles downwind. The wind was blowing toward Xavier's position, which meant the fire was coming directly at him. Xavier ran toward the helicopter carrying a specialized carrying case filled with the 3 endangered toads. He was covered in dirt, moving fast, looking like someone who'd been working at sprint speed for the last 12 minutes. The 3 toads were secured in the case with telemetry equipment still functioning. They're secure, he said, loading the case into the helicopter. Telemetry implants are all transmitting. Temperature maintained transport case. All 3 individuals are alive and mobile. Get in, I said. We're leaving now. I have data, Xavier said, holding up a field notebook and a backup data drive. 18 months of habitat observation data. If this location burns, this data burns with it. Data doesn't matter if you burn, I said. Get in the helicopter. Xavier got in at 15:06. We lifted off at 15:07 Friday afternoon. approximately 2 miles ahead of the fire front. As we gained altitude, I could see the actual scope of the situation. The fire had already consumed approximately 2,000 acres, and it was still accelerating. The evacuation corridor that Xavier had used was closing as the fire expanded eastward, cutting off access to the research location. If we'd waited another 10 minutes, that location would have been inaccessible, I said to Xavier over the helicopter intercom. You almost got trapped. I know, Xavier said quietly. And I would have stayed anyway. The extraction was successful, but the fire situation kept escalating. By 16:30 Friday, the Type 1 fire had consumed 4,500 acres and was being classified as a major incident. By 18 o'clock, it had consumed 8,000 acres. Firefighting resources from 3 counties were being mobilized. Evacuation orders were expanding to include residential areas on the fire's periphery. I was flying water drops and doing damage assessment runs. Xavier was at the UCLA research facility coordinating the captured toads' relocation to a specialized conservation center with appropriate habitat conditions. At 19 o'clock Friday, Xavier called me. The 3 toads are secure in the conservation facility. Temperature and humidity are controlled. They're stable. But Adrian, there are 8 more endangered toads in the secondary research habitat zone. They're all tagged with telemetry implants like the first 3. The fire is currently approximately 4 miles from that location. That's approximately 40 minutes at current fire progression rate. We have maybe 90 minutes before that location is in serious danger. Xavier, no. I said immediately. We evacuated you. That was the operation. We're not going back into an active fire zone. The fire is still manageable, Xavier said. We have time. And I need to get back there and capture those 8 toads. That's not a rescue operation, I said. That's asking me to deliberately fly into a fire zone for additional species captures. That violates every operational protocol. That gets me grounded. That gets my pilot's license suspended. I know what I'm asking, Xavier said. And I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe it was worth the cost. I wanted to scream at him. Instead, I sat in the helicopter monitoring fire progression. And I understood something. Xavier wasn't being irrational about risk. He was being consistent with his values. He believed that endangered species were worth protecting. The question was whether I was willing to accept institutional risk to help him protect them. I need to contact Air Operations, I said. This is not a decision I can make on my own authority. The call to Air Operations Commander Martinez was tense. You want to conduct a second extraction for endangered toads? Martinez asked, her voice suggesting she thought I'd lost my mind. Ross, the fire is still in growth phase. We're in emergency suppression mode. Every asset is allocated to protecting residential structures and managing the main fire front. I understand the operational priorities, I said, but I'm requesting authorization for a secondary SAR operation. We have telemetry-tagged endangered species in a fire zone. The operation is time-critical and requires helicopter extraction. That's not a rescue operation. Martinez said, that's a wildlife recovery operation dressed up as rescue. That's a critically endangered species preservation operation that requires emergency response. I said, and I'm asking if it qualifies for emergency SAR authorization. Martinez was quiet for a moment. What's the operational window? Current fire is approximately 4 miles from the secondary site, I said. That gives us approximately 90 minutes before the location is in direct fire threat. If I can get airborne in the next 30 minutes, I can extract the species before the danger window closes. Fire progression at that location? Martinez asked. Approximately 150 acres per hour when the fire is in growth phase. But the secondary site is in more exposed terrain where fire moves faster, I said. Current estimate is 180 acres per hour in that zone. That means 90 minutes is actually conservative. Maybe 75 minutes realistically. Visibility at the secondary site. Acceptable now, I said. But darkness in approximately 4 hours. Night operations in active fire zones are high risk because of pyrocumulus development and heat-up drafts. Martinez made her decision. I'm authorizing a single SAR extraction for endangered species recovery. You have one window. Operations must be completed by 20 o'clock hours. After sunset at 2040, you don't land near that fire zone. Visibility and smoke at night is 0 with heat turbulence. I'm not losing a pilot to wind shear and density altitude problems. You get in, you get out before dark, or you stand down. Copy, I said. Single extraction, land operations concluded by 20 o'clock. I'm moving to staging now. At 19:30 Friday, I refueled and prepared the helicopter for the secondary operation. At 19:45, I coordinated with Xavier at the conservation facility. I got authorization for 1 extraction, I told him. We have until 20 o'clock to complete landing operations. After that, I'm pulling off due to darkness and fire-related visibility problems. You have 75 minutes. How many of the 8 toads can you guarantee capturing in that time frame? I have telemetry signals for all 8, Xavier said. With a handheld receiver, I can locate them by signal strength. In 60 minutes, I can definitely get 6. In 75 minutes, I should be able to get all 8. But I can't guarantee it if any individual has gone deep into underground refugia. You get what you can get, I said. But at 1955, you're running to the extraction point whether you have 6 or 8, non-negotiable. Understood, Xavier said. I'm moving to the secondary site now. Asterisk at 2015 Friday evening. I landed the helicopter in the secondary observation site clearing. The fire was now visibly visible on the horizon, flames visible through the smoke, heat affecting local air currents. The evacuation corridor was tightening. The fire had consumed approximately 6,000 acres by now, and the secondary site was approximately 3 miles ahead of the advancing fire front. Xavier was already there, moving with incredible focus through the research site using a handheld telemetry receiver. The receiver beeped directionally when he aimed it at each tagged toad location. Capture, measure, document, place in temperature-controlled transport case. 1 captured. Xavier reported at 2020. Signal acquired on second individual. The wind had picked up, bringing more smoke into the clearing. I could see the fire's glow intensifying on the horizon. The situation was deteriorating faster than predicted. You have 35 minutes, I said. Do not exceed that window. Xavier worked with incredible focus, moving between telemetry signals. 2 captured by 2025, 3 by 2030, 4 by 2035, 5 captured at 2038, Xavier reported. 2 more signals still active. Adrian, I can get both if I have 5 more minutes. You have 3, I said. That's it. The fire progression is accelerating. I'm seeing flame advancement on visual observation. We need to leave. For captured. Xavier shouted at 2042. 5th individual signal is weak, probably underground in a refuge burrow. I'm not going to get that one. Last signal is approximately 40 meters north. 1 more individual. The time was 2043. The fire was approximately 2 miles away and closing. The winds were picking up, pyrocumulus clouds were forming above the fire, which meant vertical wind shear and heat turbulence were becoming factors. Night was approaching, which meant visibility was already degrading in the smoke. Now, I said, you come to the helicopter now, or I'm sending the crew to get you. At 2044, Xavier came running toward the helicopter carrying the transport case with 5 toads. He was moving fast, desperate to get 1 more individual, but understanding the time constraint. We lifted off at 2045 Friday evening, approximately 1.5 miles ahead of the advancing fire. As we gained altitude, I saw the fire's color changing, moving from orange to white hot at the margins, which meant we were approaching extreme intensity conditions. 5 toads, Xavier said over the intercom. I didn't get the 8th. You got 5 out of 8, I said. Maintaining controlled flight through the turbulence caused by the fire's heat column. That's 60.5% of the endangered population in that zone. That's significant. The 8th one is still down there, Xavier said, his voice tight with failure. And you're alive, I said. That's the priority. Over the next 30 hours, the fire continued to escalate beyond the secondary site retrieval. By Saturday evening, it had consumed 28,000 acres. By Sunday morning at 2 o'clock, it had consumed 42,000 acres and was still spreading, though more slowly as firefighting operations increased and weather conditions shifted slightly. The 8 endangered toads from the first extraction and the 5 toads from the second extraction were secure in the conservation facility. That represented 13 of the 47 known Sierra Nevada arroyo toads, minus 27.7% of the critically endangered population. 1 toad remained in the fire zone. Xavier was working with other researchers to assess the probability of that individual's survival. In the burned habitat. By Sunday at 14:30, the fire had been contained to 52,000 acres. By Monday morning, the evacuation orders began, lifting as the fire perimeter stabilized. I saw Xavier in person for the first time since the Friday evening evacuation when he came to the fire station, where I was coordinating with other pilots. He was wearing casual clothes, carrying the research data on a backup drive, looking like someone who'd been awake for approximately 40 hours and was coming to terms with both success and failure. 13 toads are stable, he said immediately. The conservation center has established proper habitat conditions. They're eating, moving normally. All 13 are thriving. That's extraordinary, I said. You did something remarkable. We did something remarkable, Xavier corrected. and we failed to save one. The 8th individual from the first site and the 5th individual from the secondary site there, probably lost to the fire. The other 13 are alive because you risked everything, and I risked my career, I said. That's not failure. That's the best outcome possible given the constraints. He reached out and took my hand. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Just two people who'd spent 36 hours doing something important together and had discovered that they cared about protecting the same things. Even if they approached those things from completely different angles. You risked your career, he said quietly. You could have been grounded. Your license could have been suspended. But I wasn't, I said. Because Air Operations Commander Martinez understood that emergency extraction for critically endangered species is a legitimate rescue operation. And because you were right there worth protecting. What happened over the next 3 months was the work of understanding that firefighting operations and species preservation weren't actually competing interests. They were different aspects of trying to protect a landscape worth protecting. The research habitat location remained inaccessible for 2 weeks, while fire danger persisted and structural assessment continued. When Xavier was finally able to return, he found that the fire had burned around his observation sites, leaving them damaged but still intact. The microhabitat where the endangered toads lived had survived because of the specific topography and vegetation patterns that had directed the fire intensity around, rather than through that location. Importantly, the 8th individual toad from the first site and the 5th individual from the secondary site were never recovered. They were presumed lost to the fire. By month 2, Xavier had published a preliminary research paper about the emergency extraction and relocation of endangered species during the wildfire. The paper documented the procedures for capturing and transporting critically endangered species during active fire conditions, including the role of telemetry implants in locating individuals quickly. Conservation centers around California began using his protocols. By month 3, the 13 toads that had been successfully extracted were thriving in the protected habitat space. At the conservation facility, breeding behaviors had begun among some individuals. The population was stable and growing. 3 months after the fire, Xavier was presenting his research at an international conservation conference. I attended, sitting in the back of the conference room, watching him explain endangered species protocols and wildfire coordination to an audience of ecologists and conservation specialists. After his presentation, colleagues were asking questions, offering collaboration opportunities, discussing implications for species preservation during future fire events. Xavier was answering carefully, scientifically, professionally. When he finished and stepped down from the presentation stage, I waited for him in the hallway outside the conference room. When he emerged, I pulled him into a quiet corner and kissed him. That was remarkable, I said. You took something that nobody else has documented and made it into protocols that are going to save species. I couldn't have done it without you, Xavier said. You took an institutional risk for something you didn't fully understand, because I believed it was worth protecting. I understood, I said. I understood that you care deeply about something, and protecting people who care deeply about things matters. That's all I needed to understand. Epilogue. 6 months later, fall in Los Angeles is beautiful. The wildfire season is ending. The air is clearing, and there's a specific gratitude for another season where catastrophe was managed rather than embraced. Xavier is coordinating a multi-facility collaborative effort to establish protected habitat populations for the Sierra Nevada arroyo toad. Facilities in 3 states are now breeding toads, using Xavier's telemetry-based extraction protocols. The captive population has grown from 47 individuals to 68. I'm still flying firefighting operations, but I'm also working with fire agencies and wildlife management to develop better coordination protocols between aerial firefighting operations and ground-based species preservation efforts. The protocols I helped develop have already been used into subsequent fire events. To successfully extract endangered species, we're establishing a new protected habitat location. Xavier is explaining to a group of fire management officials and conservation specialists, showing them maps and breeding data. This location is in a fire-resistant landscape area where we can naturally increase the wild population, while also creating a buffer zone against future fire threats. The officials are listening because they've learned that species preservation and fire management can work together. They've seen that the 13 toads that were evacuated during the wildfire led to protocols that are now saving species across multiple states. They understand that preserving endangered species is part of protecting the landscape during fire events. Later, after the presentation, we're sitting in Xavier's office at UCLA looking at the breeding data and population projections. We did something good, Xavier says. We took a crisis and turned it into something that helps preserve a species. And we did it while acknowledging what we lost, the two toads we couldn't save remind us why this work matters. We did that because we understood each other, I say. Because you understood that my firefighting mattered, and I understood that your conservation mattered. Because neither of us thought they were competing interests. That's love, Xavier says. Understanding what someone is trying to protect and protecting it with them. We sit there in the office surrounded by research and data and maps of habitat zones, understanding that the future of endangered species depends on people like us, one protecting immediate lives through firefighting, one protecting long-term survival through conservation, both understanding that they're protecting the same thing.